7 spine-chilling vacation horrors, terrifying tales of cursed destinations exposed. The Johnson family thought they were stepping into a summer getaway. What they didn't know was that their idyllic escape would soon erupt into the kind of spine-chilling nightmare that haunts the darkest corners of nightmares. Eager for a break from their suburban life in Springfield, Ohio, they booked a cabin in the barking woods of the Appalachian wilderness, lured in by an irresistible online deal. Mike, the father, a hard-working programmer, and Sarah, a stay-at-home mom, were determined to use this trip to connect with their children, Jake and Mia, both of whom were growing up far too fast. But what they found on arrival would test the limits of their comfortable suburban security. Nestled among towering trees, the cabin appeared charming, rustic, but as the afternoon sun dipped below the horizon, a familiar dread crept in. A sense of unease swirled around them like the thickening fog. The laughter they shared on the drive dampened as they found faded newspaper clippings stapled to the woody walls, detailing the haunting tale of the Smith family, who vanished without a trace. 30 years gone, said a headline. The locals had clammed up, murmuring only vague suggestions to steer clear of the woods. An unsettling chill took hold, a creeping terror echoing in their minds. What if they were next? Determined not to let fear dictate their vacation, they settled in and attempted to drown the eerie silence with family games. But as night cloaked the cabin, strange sounds punctuated the air. Whispers slithered through the cracks, sending chills shooting down their spines. "Dad, I swear I saw something outside." Jake's wide eyes reflected the creeping darkness outside, but Mike brushed him off. "Just your imagination," he insisted, though his heart raced with each echoing rustle. As the moon rose high, the cabin groaned under the weight of tension, tapping rattled at the windows while shadowy figures danced just beyond sight. Fear clawed at the edges of their sanity, but Mike held firm in his belief that this was nothing more than fiction. He could not allow the wild woods to unravel his family's fragile trust. "We came here to escape," he insisted, but each whisper seemed to speak otherwise. The following day, a local named Bill, with a disarming grin and unsettling twinkle in his eye, dropped by. He offered a warm invitation to share stories of the beauty in the woods, and they, despite Sarah's reservations, followed his lead. But as they stumbled into a clearing, the very essence of the forest shifted. Trees surrounded them like a fortress, and they felt their breaths hitch in their throats. Before they could process the strange energy pulsating around them, Mia, with an innocent curiosity, drifted away. Her voice echoed lightly, a fading note as panic gripped Mike and Sarah's hearts. "Mia," they screamed. The woods twisted under their feet, shifting paths leading them further into confusion. The warm glow of the sun exhausted its light, plunging them into darkness. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Night fell rapidly, wrapping them in a shroud of foreboding. The darkness echoed with silence, blending with the soft rustle of leaves. However, every creak and crack sent their hearts racing. Shadows twisted and turned, becoming more than just glimpses. They were alive, observers of their inevitable doom. Desperation fueled their frantic screams for Mia. And as Bill's facade crumbled, they grasped the looming threat of an ancient curse lurking amidst the trees. The forest wasn't just an escape, it was a hungry beast with a taste for despair. With this shocking revelation, Mike and Sarah were thrust into the nightmare they had dismissed. And just when they thought they could save their daughter, a weighty realization struck: the forest did not just know they were bound in its web of secrets. Would they relinquish their family bonds to confront what they never anticipated? As creeping vines slithered closer, it became clear. The wilderness was not merely watching, it was waiting. Mike's heart raced as panic consumed him. "Mia!" He screamed again, his voice echoing into the suffocating dark, swallowed by the ancient woods. Each passing moment felt like an eternity, the silence wrapping itself around them like a noose. "Keep moving," Sarah urged, her voice taut with fear. They stumbled forward, clinging to each other, weaving through gnarled roots that seemed to reach out and grab at their ankles. The air was thick, suffocating, filled with the scent of damp earth and something rancid that turned their stomachs. Jake, pale and trembling, tugged at Mike's sleeve. "What's happening, Dad? Where's Mia?" His wide eyes glistened with tears, mirroring the growing dread that thrummed in the trees. Mike swallowed hard, forcing words past a dry throat. "We'll find her. Just hold on tight." But even as he said it, doubt gnawed at him like a rat chewing through the last thread of hope. A whisper drifted through the wind, chilling them to the bone. It echoed in the trees, a voice only half formed, a ghostly call for help. "Mia." It was her voice, soft and pleading. Mike felt his stomach drop. "This way." He grabbed Sarah's hand, bolting toward the sound, each step sinking deeper into a fear that twisted in his gut. They reached a small clearing bathed in an eerie, pale light. The trees stood as silent sentinels, watching as if they were not alone. "Mia?" Sarah shouted, searching the shadows. But there was only silence, deep and haunting. Suddenly, the bushes rattled, and out bolted a figure, a deer, frenzied and wild-eyed. It froze, staring at them with terror before flicking its tail and sprinting away into the dark. Their breath stilled, the only sound now the thudding of their own hearts, louder than the wind, and then, from behind an ancient oak, came the low murmur of a voice. "Help me please, Mia." Mike called, fear coiling tighter around his chest. He stepped forward, but the shadows thickened, swallowing him in an almost tangible darkness. The air grew colder, pressing against them with an invisible weight. "Mia!" He yelled again, but no answer came. "Look!" Jake pointed to the ground, where an old doll lay half buried among the roots. Its porcelain face was cracked, a smile etched in a frozen grimace. They recoiled. It was wrong, so wrong, like a cursed talisman anchoring them to some unspeakable horror. "Get away!" Sarah cried out, yanking Jake back. But it was too late. The doll seemed to pulse with life, as if it had drawn power from their fear. Shadows flickered to life, swirling around them like a monstrous storm, whispering secrets meant for ears that had long been silenced. As the figures twisted from the ground, their shapes became clearer. Faces full of agony, mouths opening in silent screams, the lost souls of the woods, forever trapped. "Join us," they beckoned, their hands reaching out, desperate and hungry. Mike's arm shot out, pulling his family backward. "We have to go," he shouted, dragging them away from the ghastly sight. The shadows closed in like jaws, snapping at their heels. Each step felt weighted, the air thickening, pressing down like a cold fog. Panic surged, and he could feel their breaths quicken. Would they find Mia, or had the forest claimed her already? There was no time to think, they used every ounce of strength to push through the dense thicket. But each rustle, each whisper, felt as if the cursed forest was closing in, tightening its grip. "Where is she?" Sarah's voice trembled, wavering on the edge of despair. Mike turned to assure her, but as he looked back, the certainty in her eyes had evaporated, leaving only fear and doubt. The woods shuddered, responding to their terror, and they heard it again, the soft, fading cry. She was close, but what awaited them was unknown. Just beyond the next set of trees, the familiar whisper returned, stronger. "Help me!" In the distance, past the twisted trunks of the trees, a pale light flickered. Hope? Or a deeper trap set by the woods to lure them in? As they pressed forward, a screech pierced the air, echoing sharply, rattling their hearts to their core. Something was coming. Would they find Mia, or had hope already escaped them? The forest waited with bated breath, poised to reveal its dark secrets, ready to take more than just their fears. What price would they pay for the truth hidden in the heart of the oppressive darkness? The pale light flickered again, casting ghostly shadows that danced between the twisted trunks, beckoning. Mike pushed forward, his legs heavy as if dragging through sludge. The oppressive silence inched closer, wrapping around them, thickening the atmosphere until it felt more like a suffocating blanket than air. "Mia. Please." His voice sounded distant, swallowed by the trees, muffled and washed away by fear. He could feel Sarah's grip tighten in his hand, her breath quickening beside him. Jake was silent, his small body trembling, little more than an echo of the terror that gripped the parents. "Look." Sarah pointed wildly into the darkness where the faint glow flickered again. It seemed to beckon, to promise safety, but deep within him a warning screamed. Something about that light was wrong, something about this forest was wrong. Doubt crept in like an insidious fog, clawing at his resolve. With each step, the air turned colder, biting at their skin like 1,000 needles. They stumbled deeper into the darkness, the silhouettes of trees looming over them like monstrous giants. "Stay close," Mike shouted, adrenaline coursing through him as they entered an even thinner grasp of light. And then the sound of laughter. Childhood joy, echoing through the trees. The kind of laughter that should bring comfort, but here it felt twisted. "Mia? Is that you?" Mike sprinted forward, adrenaline fueling his movements. The echoes of her voice mixed with the laughter, taunting him, pulling him toward the heart of the woods, where shadows merged into deeper, darker shapes. He could feel the weight of something watching them, waiting, dangling his daughter like bait. The clearing ahead was swathed in that eerie light, almost inviting amid the dread closing in around them. As they broke through the last cluster of trees, Mike stumbled to a stop, breathless, heart hammering against his ribs. What lay before them was a grotesque scene. A circle of dolls, each with their cracks and scars, their vacant eyes gleaming in the pale light. They were arranged meticulously, staring at something in their center. "Mia?" Sarah whispered, voice trembling. The air thickened, stifling. The dolls seemed to watch them, the fabric of their dresses fluttering as if touched by a non-existent wind. In the middle of the circle lay a teddy bear, its fur matted with dirt and teardrop stains. I remember that bear," Jake whispered, eyes wide. "She used to take it everywhere." "Mia!" Mike shouted, but the scream came out weak, the sound lost in the stillness, swallowed by the dread that loomed. The laughter erupted again, much closer now, and a shadow moved at the edge of the clearing. Mike's heart pounded furiously as he scanned the tree-line, his breath hitching in his throat. "Where are you?" He could feel the heaviness of despair creeping in, solid and cold. And then, it hit him. The last time he heard her laughter was at a park, and they'd never spoken of the whispers that followed, murmurs of children lost in the woods. What if those stories were true? There was a rustle behind them, then a sigh. "Help me, Mia." Their eyes snapped in the direction of the sound. But Mike's heart sank further as he felt the darkness around them shift, shadows thickening, darkening like an impending storm. The doll's eyes seemed to glint in knowing triumph, absorbing the fear surrounding them. Suddenly, a figure bolted past them, a fleeting shadow shaped not quite like Mia but moving desperately. It was gone just as quickly, vanishing into the churning blackness of the woods. "Did you see that?" Sarah looked at Mike, fear straining her words. Before Mike could respond, a loud bang echoed through the clearing, followed by frantic whispers from the shadows, growing louder, chanting his name, mocking him. Join us, panic surged. There was no time. "Run!" he shouted, pulling Sarah and Jake away from the circle of dolls, away from the dreadful call of the woods. But as they sprinted back to the tree-line, the forest stirred, tendrils of darkness stretching out, reaching for them like the hands of the lost souls. "Don't look back!" he yelled, but a terrifying chill paralyzed him when he heard it again, a faint echo of Mia's voice, clearer this time, intermingled with the laughter of the lost. As they plunged deeper into the blackness, breathless and terrified, Mike felt a strange pull toward the heart of the forest, an undeniable truth lurking just beyond the veil of darkness, a price to pay for the hidden truth, what awaited them beyond the next tree. Would they uncover Mia, or would they become just another whisper in the cursed woods? The ground churned beneath them as they raced through the darkness, roots clawing at their shins, the whispers clawing at their sanity. Every beat of Mike's heart echoed in his ears, drowning out the laughter that chased them, intermingled with Mia's fading plea. "Help me" faded like echoes in a dream, pulling at the edges of his consciousness. "Mike! This way!" Sarah's urgent tone snapped him partially out of it. He swung his head to find her pointing frantically to their right, toward the dense thicket. It was a leap of faith, but they had no choice. The branches whipped against their skin as they barreled into the underbrush. Dark shadows twisted among the trees, and still that laughter danced around them, taunting, teasing. It felt all too familiar, a noxious mist that seeped into Mike's thoughts, filling his mind with horror. "Turn back," a voice croaked from deep within the shadows. It wasn't Mia. Mike froze, dread pooling at the base of his spine, while Sarah clutched Jake closer, her face ghostly pale. The woods groaned as if sharing their grieving soul. The phantom voice continued, barely a whisper, yet resonating with haunting clarity, "Your little girl is not here. She's gone." "No." His voice cut through the brush as he started to back away, dragging Sarah and Jake with him. The forest itself seemed to shift, closing ranks around them, thickets looming like sentinels ready to strike. "Mike, we can't just stay here. We have to keep moving." Sarah's voice wavered, breaking the silence. He swallowed hard, tearing his eyes away from the oppressive shadows. "Let us go." The urgency in his voice matched the pulse racing through his veins. They broke through another wall of trees and stumbled onto a breathtaking sight, a clearing bathed in moonlight. The light, however, felt wrong, too bright, too stark, too alive. There, in the center, stood a tall structure that appeared to be a long-abandoned treehouse, covered with vines and split wood. "Over there we could hide," Jake whispered, his small voice barely above a tremble. The treehouse felt like a promise, but the closer they got, the more Mike could feel it thrumming with a dreadful energy. It called to him, and in that moment, the laughter returned, louder than before. It echoed like 1,000 lost souls urging them to turn back. "We shouldn't." Sarah's voice was shaky, but something deep within Mike surged, a mixture of determination and dread binding him to the rickety stairs. "We might find her inside." "Are you out of your mind?" Sarah's eyes widened, panic spilling from her. "It'll only trap us." But the urge to know, to uncover the truth, was overpowering. He nodded, each step feeling more inevitable than the last. With each creak of wood underfoot, he glanced back at Sarah, despair mingling with looming darkness in her eyes. As they stepped into the treehouse, Mike was enveloped by a musty scent of decay, a graveyard of lost childhood. Inside, the faint light flickered above a single bulb dangled precariously from the ceiling. Cobwebs draped across the walls, obscuring age-old memories left to rot. Amid the darkness, a soft sound made them freeze. A sound that pierced through the air, the sound of muffled sobbing. "Mia?" Mike called, voice trembling. The sobbing ceased. No response. The air became dense, thickening around them as if the shadows themselves were pressing in. Mike exchanged a glance with Sarah. Gone was the will to find, it was replaced with primal fear. Suddenly, the bulb flickered violently, and vision blurred. In that moment of darkness, faceless figures emerged from the walls, darting shadows that whispered secrets of despair. "Join us," it echoed, the chorus of voices melding seamlessly. Hope abandoned them as they darted for the door, but the entrance closed like a mouth snapping shut, trapping them within. With nowhere left to run, Mike's heart sank at the realization. They had stepped into a trap far darker than any horror he could have imagined. The suffocating weight of the forest outside pressed against the treehouse, forcing them to confront the reality. What if Mia was already inside the darkness? A new whisper curled around him, seductive yet chilling. What if she wasn't lost but something else entirely? "Help me this time." It was not just a plea, it was a command. What awaited them in the shadows of that treehouse? Would they emerge as seekers or become victims of the forest's insatiable hunger? The whispers rose and fell, a chilling symphony that threaded through the treehouse. Shadows danced across the walls, their movements so swift, so light, it felt as if they were mocking the terrified trio trapped inside. Mike's breath quickened as he fought to steady himself against a surge of panic. "Mike, we have to get out," Sarah shouted. Her voice trembled, fear wrestling with desperation. She reached for the door, but it remained stubbornly shut, as though sealed by some unseen force. The air crackled with malevolence. Mike pressed his palms against the wooden walls, willing them to give. "We have to find another way," he breathed, scanning the room filled with echoes of lost innocence. The sobbing had returned, louder, pouring from the corners, thick as fog, wrapping around him. "Please," a child's voice cried, creeping around him like a shadow. It was Mia. He knew it was her. "Help me, where are you?" His heart pounded, urgency sharpening his senses. "Mia." The sobbing stuttered, and a momentary silence blanketed the room. Mike exchanged a frantic glance with Sarah, their shared dread palpable. Jake, pale and wide-eyed, clutched his mother tightly, too afraid to utter a sound. The bulb flickered again, stuttering, casting long shadows that danced across their faces. Each tremor sent a jolt of terror through Mike. How much longer could they endure this? "Mike, we can't stay here," Sarah insisted, her voice a rising crescendo of terror and resolve. "We need to find another way out." In the dim light, he noticed a trapdoor above them, slightly ajar. His heart shouted with hope. "There." He pointed up, adrenaline surging as he reached for the rickety ladder nailed to the wall. "We can climb out." But even as he spoke, the laughter bloomed anew, dark and mocking. "You want to escape?" It echoed, swirling around them. Time slowed as Mike hesitated, fear clawing at his throat. The weight of the unseen eyes bore down on him, squeezing. "Listen to her, Mike," Sarah whispered, her voice low and shaky. "Please, we have to think about Jake." She turned to their son, brushing the hair from his forehead. "It's going to be okay, buddy. Just trust us." He watched his love and fear flicker through her eyes, the reality setting in. Each moment felt like a countdown to something inevitable, something lurking just beyond the walls of their sanctuary. He turned back to the trapdoor, hand reaching for the first rung. "We climb," he insisted, every fiber in him screaming they had to act fast. They began their ascent, hearts racing with urgency. The laughter spiraled into a cacophony, a terrifying chorus that filled the air with dread. Shadows shifted closer, wrapping around the ladder rungs like tendrils reaching to drag them back. With every step, Mike felt the pressure behind him swell. The voices shrieked, echoing their terror, "Join us." The trapdoor gaped like a maw, dark and inviting. Jake hesitated on the second rung, his small hands cold and trembling. "I don't want to," he whimpered. "Stay close, Jake," Mike shouted, fear igniting his voice as he climbed higher. Finally, he reached the threshold, pushing the door wide enough to peer into the abyss above. What awaited them? A blinding light burst through, illuminating a room strewn with broken toys and forgotten memories, a place that felt soaked in sorrow. It didn't belong to Mia. It belonged to the forest. He felt a tug again, pulling him down toward the abyss behind. A cacophony of laughter exploded, clawing at the edges of his sanity. It was their final moment. It was now or never. "He's coming," a voice hissed from beneath, sharp and commanding. Mike faced the growing void, heart pounding like thunder. He could feel the terror winding tighter, an insidious dread whispering in his ear that it wasn't Mia he would save, but something entirely different. "Mike!" Sarah shrieked, grabbing at him. He lunged upward, grasping for the light, the promise of escape. Would they find solace, or was this a portal to greater horrors? "Help me," echoed again, but this time with a dark undertone. As he pulled Sarah and Jake into the strange room, he could feel the world shifting beneath him as the laughter trailed into something darker. What had they awakened? Would they emerge into the light? Or were they about to plunge into the depths of nightmares? They emerged into a room that felt too heavy, too thick with dread. The toys were grotesque, eyes staring back in judgment, mouths seemingly twisted in perpetual laughter. The walls, grimy and stained, echoed with memories that did not belong to them. Broken dolls, their porcelain faces cracked, lay scattered like forgotten secrets at their feet. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. She stepped into the room hesitantly, glancing around, searching for anything familiar. Her gaze landed on a faded photograph hanging crookedly on the wall. It was a picture of a family, faces eerily similar to their own, frozen in time, but the smiles felt wrong, almost sinister. "Look at this," she said, her voice trembling. Jake clutched his mother's leg tightly, his small body shaking with fear. Mike felt the prickling of anxiety crawl down his spine. They weren't alone anymore. The air felt alive, pulsing with unseen eyes. "Where are we?" Mike mused, but deep down, he feared he already knew. Memories of local legends whispered through his mind, a family that vanished, leaving only their laughter behind. It was a dark tale, one that haunted the town for years. As the floor creaked beneath their feet, the laughter faded, replaced by faint, distant cries. "Help me!" The voice was different now, more desperate. "Do you hear that?" Jake asked, his voice barely a murmur. "Yes," Mike replied, scanning the room, every corner brimming with shadows hungry for light. The back of the room opened to a narrow hallway, darkness pooling where the light dared not tread. "We need to keep moving," he said, forcing a surge of courage. "Maybe we can find a way out." The shadows stretched, warping the hallway into a ghastly tunnel. As they stepped forward, Mike felt them shift unexpectedly, like the very walls were alive, tasting their fear. He could sense the weight of danger building behind them, the fabric of reality fraying at the edges. Suddenly, Jake let out a sob. "Mommy, I'm scared." "Just hold my hand, sweetheart," Sarah responded, though her voice quaked. Her hand gripped Mike's tightly, fear coursing through their connection. They moved deeper, hearts pounding to a frantic rhythm, each step threatening to crack the silence into a million pieces. The whispers beckoned like sirens, tugging at their minds, promising comfort in their despair. "Join us with us forever. Stop. Just stop." Mike shouted, desperation escaping his lips. "We're not going to join anyone." But the walls vibrated in response, the very air thickening. Shadows reached out, coiling around their ankles, dragging at their confidence. He squeezed Sarah's hand tighter, resolving to take them out, no matter what. "This way!" he yelled, pointing down the hallway lined with haunting portraits, eyes piercing through the dimness. As they picked up speed, past the soulless faces watching them, Jake cried out again. "Mom! I see them." "What?" Sarah's eyes widened in terror. "Those kids, they're behind us." Mike turned, and the sight froze his blood. A group of children stood in the doorway they had just escaped, their laughter circling like a noose, faces twisted with shadows and secrets. They beckoned to Jake, eyes black as night. "No! Don't you dare!" Mike yelled, rushing forward, but it was too late. A fog rolled in, thick and suffocating. The last thing he saw before the darkness swallowed them was the children reaching out, laughter melding into screams, drowning in echoes of despair. He felt a pressure rushing against him, pulling him apart into nothingness, then, silence. Complete, heavy silence. "Mike?" Sarah's voice trembled in the dark, and he felt her gripping him again. "What's happening?" As the shadows receded, revealing a room even darker than before, an ominous chill settled over them. What lay ahead? Would they discover the truth behind the tormented laughter or remain trapped in a nightmare of their own making? What secrets did the forest guard, still waiting in the dark? And would they find the way back after facing the horrors that lurked just beyond their vision? The air felt thicker now, each breath a struggle against the oppressive darkness wrapping around them like a heavy shroud. Mike looked at Sarah, her face pale, fear etched in every line of her features. Jake stood between them, eyes wide and shimmering with unshed tears, clutching the hem of Mike's shirt desperately. "Did we make it out?" Sarah's voice wavered, echoing across the dim expanse. Mike strained to listen, half expecting the children's laughter to resume, cold and mocking. Instead, an unsteady quiet cloaked the room, broken only by their muted breaths. All around them lay shadowy shapes which hinted at primitive, monstrous forms melted into the darkness. "I don't think so," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "This place, it feels wrong." He stepped forward, feeling the cold, damp floor beneath his bare feet. "Let's go." He turned to guide them, but the narrow hallway stretched endlessly before them, shadows twisting along the walls like tendrils reaching for life. "Look!" Jake pointed to a corner where a flickering light broke through the darkness. It danced erratically as if alive, casting eerie shapes against the walls. "Is that?" Sarah squinted, her voice trailing off. "It could be a way out," Mike urged, leading them toward the dim glow. But as they moved closer, the light flickered and faded, leaving them once again in suffocating darkness. "Where did it go?" Jake whimpered, his small voice trembling. Panic brushed Mike's chest like a chilling wind. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to escape the consuming dread closing in on them. "Maybe it's just broken," he tried to sound reassuring, but even he wasn't convinced. Behind them, the whispers rose again, softer, almost soothing. They echoed through the hollow space, promising safety, enticing them into the shadows. "Come play, come join us, don't be scared, stop," Mike shouted, and the walls quivered as if responding to his fear. "We need to stick together." They pressed forward, hearts racing, desperate to break free from the clutches of whatever nightmare had ensnared them. They turned into the first room they reached, its walls adorned with grotesque portraits. The faces seemed charged with life, slipping from joyful to sorrowful in mere seconds. A flicker of something caught Mike's eye, a simple door framed with twisted wood. Hope surged through him. There. That could be it. While Mike hurried toward the door, a shout broke from Jake. "Mom!" His small frame jerked, pointing at a small figure kneeling on the ground before them, shoulders shaking violently. "What is it?" Sarah rushed forward, panic welling in her voice. But as they approached, the figure turned, revealing a face that mirrored Jake's, yet it wore an expression of deep sadness intertwined with an unsettling grin, eyes dark and empty. "Help me," it whimpered. "Jake, stay back!" Mike yelled, rushing to pull his son away. But the little boy, drawn by confusion and fear, took a step closer. "Mommy?" "No." Mike's heart raced as he felt the ground shift beneath them. Shadows curled and swept toward the figure, thick and hungry like a tide pulling out to the sea. "Run!" he screamed, grabbing Jake and pulling Sarah with him. The figure began to dissolve into the darkness, its whispered plea melding into the night. They bolted down another hallway, the whispers morphing into a sonic roar, drowning out everything else. "Join us!" echoed, wrapping around them like chains. As they raced through the corridor, the shadows elongated, reaching for them, pulling at their souls with an icy grip. Mike felt a surge of desperation clawing at his chest. They had to find a way out. Just ahead, he glimpsed a glimmering portal. It shimmered with an otherworldly light. It beckoned to them like a lighthouse to a ship lost at sea. But behind them, the laughter returned, louder, more urgent. "You can't escape. Stay with us." The sound wrapped around Mike like a vice, squeezing the breath from his lungs. "Don't stop," he yelled, pushing them forward as the vibrations of the laughter reached fever pitch. They burst through the doorway, and suddenly found themselves standing in a vast, open room bathed in a sickly light. The laughter steadily transformed into screams, the cries of countless souls trapped within. Mike's breath caught as he realized they weren't alone. Figures loomed around them, distorted faces wilted into despair, reaching out as if to claim the living. "Mommy, what are they?" Jake whispered, trembling beside him. A glint of malice flickered across the faces of those wraith-like figures, and Mike knew they had only begun to uncover the horrors awaiting them. Then, without warning, the entrance behind them slammed shut, plunging them into only shadows. With a deafening swell, the figures advanced, and the last thing Mike remembered was the encroaching darkness closing in. Could they survive this hell? Or was this the fate they had been lured into? Mike's heart pounded wildly. The whispers had turned into a cacophony, each voice layered with a sadness that seeped into his bones. Panic coursed through him, fueling his desperation. The faces that closed in around them were stretching, warping, shifting from human to something hideous. Shadows danced in the corners of his eyes, flickering like the dying embers of hope. "Go!" he shouted, urging Sarah and Jake to run. They turned away from the spiders of despair clutching at them, racing toward the far wall where soft light crested like a wave threatening to break, but the ground underfoot felt treacherous, slick and alive, as if it had begun to absorb their fear. Mike stumbled, his foot caught on a raised plank, and he crashed to the floor. The sickly light flickered, casting ghastly silhouettes as he struggled to rise. "Daddy!" Jake's voice pierced through the screams. Disoriented and frantic, the boy had stopped, frozen in place. Mike shot up, charging. He meant to push Jake away from the encroaching figures lurking just behind him, their hands reaching out with twisted fingers. "Get back!" he yelled, feeling a surge of protectiveness overtake his fear. But when he reached Jake, he grasped his son's shoulder and turned him around, only to find something else staring back. The creature wore Jake's face, but its grin was far too wide, its eyes void of warmth. "Daddy, help me," it echoed, voice laced with Jake's innocent lilt, but twisted into something dark and wrong. "No!" Mike's scream erupted from his throat, a primal sound of anguish that bubbled with despair. The facade flickered briefly, and he saw his real son standing just behind it, terror painted clearly on his face. Without thinking, Mike lunged forward. He grabbed Jake's wrist, yanking him away from the doppelganger. As they dashed towards the flickering light, the fake Jake fell into shadow, bleeding into the darkness as if it were water. Behind them, a rumbling was growing, the very walls resounding with a pulse of dread. "Come back! You'll never escape!" The voices chorused, mingling with laughter that turned sickeningly sweet. They dashed through the brightening portal, the light wrapping around them like a shroud, but as soon as they crossed, the entrance slammed shut behind them with a thunderous roar. A split second of calm struck, but horror quickly crawled back up their spines as they realized they'd merely entered another chamber. This room was circular, with walls pulsating like a living being. A gigantic mirror stood in the center, its surface rippling, distorting their reflections. Mike took a cautious step forward, drawn by the sickly allure of it. The reflections twisted, showing not just their forms, but a swirling backdrop of all the lost realms they had stumbled through, people trapped in endless nightmares. "Don't touch it," Sarah whispered, clutching Jake tightly against her. The child trembled in her arms, hiding his face against her shoulder. The mirror beckoned them, urging them to reach out, to find the solace in its depths. "Not just a reflection," Mike stammered as he felt a pulse, a breath from the mirror, calling to him. Suddenly, one of the figures in the reflection twisted its head, its mouth curling upward in a blasphemous smile, but its eyes, those dark, hungry eyes, focused solely on Mike. "Join us," it crooned, voice echoing in a choir of voices, as if 1,000 souls were yearning in unison. Mike's vision blurred at the edges. The mirror shimmered with an allure far too dangerous, something that promised escape even as it concealed death. "Mike," Sarah said, her voice a thread woven with panic, a plea for clarity in the madness. "We have to get out of here. Now." As they backed away, a low growl reverberated through the room, shaking the very air around them. The figures in the reflection began to claw at the glass, their hands pressing against it as if trying to break through. The deafening sound of smacking palms echoed loud, mingling with shrieks of laughter. Waves of energy slammed into Mike, making him feel lightheaded. He thought of the exit, of freedom. Was it behind him, or was it trapped here too? Help me! Another familiar voice cried, ripping through the chaos. Mom? Jake squeaked, the innocence in him igniting hope in the thickening fog of despair. No! Mike shouted, clutching Jake tighter. Stay away from it. But the voice continued to call, a soft, sweet sound reaching out through the torment. He felt a tug at his heart, painful and familiar, as it beckoned him forward. What would it take to break free from this cycle? Would the mirror reveal salvation or condemn them to join the wretched souls trapped forever? As they pressed against the wall, the call grew louder, more insistent, and they had to choose: face the mirror or run back into the metallic darkness beyond. The decision loomed heavy, and in that heartbeat of suspense, the world held its breath around them. Mike's gaze darted back and forth between the mirror and the dark expanse behind them. The reflections twisted like grotesque marionettes, shrieking for salvation while their faces flickered in and out of recognition. Sarah's grip tightened around Jake, her breath hitching as the growl intensified, a low rumble from the depths of the unseen. Mike, we can't stay here. Her voice shook, whispering urgency into the chaos. The mirror's pulse seemed to synchronize with her rapid heartbeat, a familiar rhythm that threatened to pull them into its depths. Stop! Mike yelled at the mirror. He steeled himself against its hypnotic allure, determined not to succumb to its seductive whispers. We have to think. But as he looked and the mirror reflected their growing panic, its surface began to shift, morphing into scenes that sliced through Mike's resolve like a blade. He saw moments from their lives: Jake's first steps, family laughter, playful days in the park. Then the images turned dark, shadows filled the corners, and suffocating dread hung like a noose. Listen to me! Mike shouted, desperation clawing at his throat. The mirror shows us what we fear. The voices behind them surged, chanting softly, join us, join us. They grew frenetic, rising in pitch, a storm of malicious glee. Mike clutched his son tighter, steering Jake away from the beckoning reflections. Yet the boy's eyes were glued to the glass. Daddy! Look! The child's innocence strained against the weight of terror. The reflections of their family smiled back at him, only to twist into the mournful visages of despair. It's Mom! No! Sarah hissed, pulling Jake close. But the boy was already moving, drawn toward the mirror like a moth to flame. The wails from the glass hit a fever pitch, drowning out Mike's shouts. Please, Jake! Don't touch it! But before Mike could reach him, a flash erupted from the reflections. Jake stretched his small hand toward the mirror, captivated, entranced. A figure wearing the familiar form of his mother emerged, hands reaching out as if to embrace him. Help me, sweetheart. Let me out. Mike lunged, but it was too late. The moment Jake's fingers brushed the surface, the mirror rippled violently, shattering silence into chaos. The air crackled as the room spun, the walls breathing in and out like a living thing. Shadows writhed closer, clawing at their sanity. In a split second, the mirror warped, extending dark tendrils that snaked around Jake's wrist. He jerked back, panic etching lines into his innocent face. Daddy! It hurts! Hold on to me! Mike shouted, reaching out with every ounce of strength. He dragged Jake with him, pulling away from the mirror's pull as screams boiled over, echoing like thunder, the walls pulsing with a monstrous heartbeat. The mirror began to distort, as if it couldn't maintain the connection. Join us, so close, come back, it whispered, each word a snare tightening around their throats. Mike fought against the crushing dread, drawing in a deep breath. Get ready to run! He yelled. On my count 3, 2, and then the floor trembled beneath them, a rumbling echo of their worst fears shattering the uneasy calm. The mirror's surface split, revealing dark shapes clawing their way through. A scream erupted, piercing their chaos. You can't escape! Run! Mike cried, adrenaline surging as he grabbed Jake, bolting toward the edge of the circular room. The figures in the mirror howled, a cacophony threatening to swallow them whole, but as they raced towards what should have been freedom, Mike felt the ground shift beneath him. The exit began to melt away, an illusion dissolving into the shadows. "Where do we go?" Sarah panicked, her eyes darting around, desperately searching for a path through the chaotic maelstrom surrounding them. "Anywhere but here." Mike couldn't think. They had to escape this realm of fear, they had to keep moving. Wasn't there a way out? But that voice, that beckoning whisper, grew louder again, offering solace as it cloaked the terror lingering just out of sight. Join us, the choice pulsed through the air, solid and heavy. Would they brace for the darkness, or try to glean a way to slice through the nightmare? With his heart racing and enemies closing in, Mike had to make a choice that could cost them everything. The decision weighed on his shoulders, suffocating him in uncertainty as shadows loomed ever closer. What lay beyond the mirror's promise? Would they find liberation, or would they tumble deeper into despair? As Mike's instincts screamed for action, he realized time was running out. The walls pulsated, urging them towards an uncertain fate. With shadows slithering around them, Mike took a deep breath, steeling himself for action. The whispers intensified, a maddening tempest of voices clawing at the edges of his sanity. "We can't listen. We have to escape." He turned toward Sarah and Jake, their faces illuminated by the grotesque light emanating from the sinister mirror still drawing them in. "Trust me," he shouted, grabbing both of their hands, squeezing tight. "On 3, we run." Before they could answer, he felt the ground tremble beneath them, the pulsating walls drumming with the rhythm of their fear. It felt like the heartbeat of the forest itself, hungry and chasing. 1. 2. The words spilled out of him, urgency propelling him forward. 3. Go. They surged forward, bolting away from the mirror, away from the grasping shadows reaching to claim them. The chaos roared behind them, merging into a cacophony of screams and laughter, but Mike kept his eyes peeled on the distant horizon of light. A way out, a beacon of hope. As they ran, the tunnel shifted around them, walls contorting in a maze of terror, but Mike focused on the flickers of brightness ahead. He could hear Sarah's quickened breathing, could feel Jake's small hand trembling in his grip. But they were together. They were alive. And that was all that mattered. With every step, the laughter grew more frantic. "You can't leave. Join us." But they pushed through, breaking past tormented shadows that faded behind them. The light beckoned like a lifeline, each step washing over them with the promise of freedom. They crashed through the final darkness and into a blinding light. Instinctively, Mike shielded his eyes, the sudden brightness overwhelming after the suffocating shadows. As his vision adjusted, he gasped, taking in the familiar sight of a sun-drenched forest clearing. The towering trees loomed above them, but it felt safe, the air filled with the chirping of distant birds rather than the haunting whispers of the dark. Did we make it?" Sarah whispered, her voice tremulous, wavering with disbelief. "I think so." Mike turned to Jake, who stood wide-eyed, excitement mingling with the last traces of fear. "We're out, buddy. We're safe." But just as hope began to swell within them, a faint sound wafted through the trees, a quiet giggle echoing faintly yet disturbingly familiar. "It's Mia!" Jake exclaimed, a glimmer of hope shining in his eyes. "Where?" Sarah spun around, staring into the depths of the woods. "Mia!" Mike called, stepping forward into the clearing, heart pounding. The shadows from the trees danced menacingly at the edges, but all he could think about was finding his daughter. "Mia!" he shouted again, voice tinged with desperation. The laughter returned, eerily delighted and dissonant, but Mike felt something shift deep within him. He had felt fear pulling him down, a darkness swallowing his daughter whole, but not any longer. They wouldn't let the forest win. "Mia!" he yelled one more time, adrenaline cracking through his voice. "We're coming for you." And suddenly, before them, the air rippled, a form began to take shape. It burst through the brush, wild and tangled, yet vibrant. It was Mia. Her hair flared about her face like a wild halo, a sparkle hardly diminished by the dirt smudged across her cheeks. As she stumbled into the clearing, a brilliant smile broke across her face. "Daddy! Mommy! Jake!" Relief washed over Mike and Sarah as they ran to her, embracing her tightly, tethering their family back together once again. "I was trying to find you," Mia exclaimed, grinning effortlessly. "I got lost but I knew you'd come." In that moment, the oppressive forest hung behind them, the shadows fading into mere outlines, giving up their grip as they witnessed the boundless strength of a family reunited. But as they turned to leave, the laughter twisted into a sinister crescendo, the trees whispering in anger, demanding reclamation. The very ground shifted underfoot, threatening to pull them back into the darkness. Mike felt the looming tension tighten. It was now or never. With Mia in his arms, he shouted to Sarah, "Run to the car. We'll meet there." They didn't look back, sprinting away, adrenaline carrying them like fire through the shadows. The laughter mingled with rage chased behind them, but they burst out of the underbrush, barreling straight to their vehicle. Reaching the car, Mike fumbled with the keys, his heart pounding, fingers trembling. He slid into the driver's seat, quickly following Sarah and Jake, who were already buckling in with Mia nestled between them. "Go, go, go!" Sarah urged. As he turned the key, the engine roared to life, the sound jarring against the haunting silence of the forest behind them. Mike slammed the gear into drive, tires screeching against the gravel, propelling them forward as the trees receded in the rearview mirror. "I love you," he said breathlessly, casting a glance at his family. "We made it out." Their relief broke free as the clearing dwindled into the trees, laughter melding into a distant echo. They flew down the winding road, the shadows left behind. As they drove further away from the cabin and the forest that had almost consumed them, the weight on Mike's chest finally began to lift. "Can we go to the ice cream shop now?" Jake asked, his voice laced with excitement. "Sure thing, buddy," Mike replied, winding a protective arm around Sarah and Mia. They were together, they were strong. But deep down, he knew the forest was still there, lying in wait. "Let us never come back here again," Sarah said quietly, her voice filled with determination. They all nodded in agreement, casting one last look at the dark woods fading into the horizon, because they were a family. They had conquered the shadows before. And no matter what lurked beyond those trees, they would face whatever came next together. As they drove into the sunset, a pure, golden light broke through the darkness, wrapping them in warmth and safety at last. You need to subscribe now. Don't miss our next exclusive stories that dive deeper into the unknown. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and let us know you're enjoying this journey. Flood the comments with your reactions and wild theories about this nail-biting conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to feel the thrill of the chase. This is the moment to show your support for the channel.